You don't quit because you're weak. You quit because something breaks before the results arrive. And nobody ever taught you how to survive that phase. Every time you start something new, the same pattern shows up. At first, it feels right, clear, hopeful, full of energy. You think, finally, this is it. Then weeks pass, sometimes months, and nothing obvious happens. No breakthrough, no reward, no moment that says, keep going. That's when doubt creeps in, quietly. You don't announce it. You don't panic. You just start questioning. Is this actually working? Did I choose the wrong thing? Am I wasting my time? And eventually, you stop. Not dramatically. You just fade out. You tell yourself a clean lie. I learned a lot. It wasn't the right time. I'll come back to it later. But later never comes. Because the real reason you quit was never addressed. Here it is. You quit too early because you expect feedback before progress is visible. And most meaningful things give feedback last, not first. You were trained to believe effort should quickly show results. Study grades, work, paycheck, exercise, soreness. Clear cause, clear effect. So when you enter a domain where effort produces silence, your brain panics. No feedback feels like failure, even when it isn't. This is the first trap. You mistake silence for evidence that it's not working. But silence is normal in anything that compounds. Wealth is silent at first. Skill is silent at first. Reputation is silent at first. Nothing looks different until everything does. But your brain doesn't tolerate that gap well because it was never trained to. School taught you to expect fast confirmation. Life doesn't offer it, so you quit in the gap. The gap is where almost everyone leaves, and the gap is where winners are formed. Here's the second reason you quit too early. You confuse discomfort with misalignment. The moment something feels hard, boring, or frustrating, you assume it's wrong. This shouldn't feel like this. If this was meant for me, it would feel better. That belief quietly destroys progress, because growth feels bad before it feels good. Every skill feels awkward before it feels natural. Every new identity feels fake before it feels real. But you were never taught to expect that. So when resistance shows up, you interpret it as a warning. It's not. It's the cost of entry. High performers don't ask, why does this feel uncomfortable? They ask, is this discomfort normal for someone at this stage? That question keeps them moving. Your question stops you. Here's the third reason you quit too early. You measure progress emotionally instead of structurally. You ask, do I feel motivated? Do I feel confident? Do I feel excited? Feelings are terrible metrics. They fluctuate daily. Progress doesn't, but progress is often invisible until late. So you rely on emotion to tell you if it's working. When emotion drops, you assume progress stopped. It didn't. You just stopped feeling it. And because you think feelings equal truth, you quit. This is why motivation never lasts for you. Not because you lack discipline. Because motivation is not designed to survive repetition. It dies right when repetition becomes necessary. You quit right at the point where consistency would have started compounding. Now let's talk about comparison. This one kills people fast. You look around and see others moving faster, getting attention, seeing results. And you think, they figured it out. I'm behind. I must be doing it wrong. So you quit your path to try theirs. You jump tracks, new plan, new direction, new hope. But here's the problem. You're comparing your middle to someone else's highlight. And you don't see the years they spent in silence. So you assume you're late. You're not. You're early. But early feels like being lost if you don't understand the process. So you quit early. Again, now here's a painful truth. You don't quit because things aren't working. You quit because you don't trust delayed payoff. You need reassurance, proof, something to hold on to. And when it doesn't show up, you retreat. High performers accept delayed payoff as normal. They don't ask, is this working? They ask, have I done this long enough for it to work? That question alone would save you years, but you were never taught to think that way. Now let's talk about identity, because this is where quitting really happens. Every time you start something new, you temporarily adopt a new identity. I'm someone who trains. I'm someone who builds. I'm someone who's changing. But identity feels fragile at first. It's not supported by evidence yet. So when doubt hits, you retreat to your old identity, the one that feels familiar, safe, accepted. Quitting is often not about the task. It's about returning to a familiar self, because being new is uncomfortable. Being inexperienced is humbling. Being unseen is lonely. So you quit to feel like yourself again. That relief is temporary. The regret lasts longer. Here's another reason you quit too early. You expect clarity before commitment. You want to know where this leads, what the payoff is, how long it will take. But clarity comes after commitment, not before. You don't see the path until you walk it. So, waiting for clarity guarantees stagnation. High performers commit first. They adjust later. You wait to be sure, and you never start fully. Now, let's talk about effort, because this is where people lie to themselves. You tell yourself, I gave it my best, but did you? Or did you give it comfortable effort? Effort that didn't disrupt your life. Effort that didn't threaten your ego. Effort that still allowed escape. Most people quit while still holding back. They never went all in, so quitting feels justified. But deep down, they know they didn't fully commit, and that knowledge eats at them. Now, here's the most dangerous reason you quit early. You don't have a rule for what quitting actually means. So quitting happens emotionally. On a bad day, after a frustrating moment, after boredom sets in, high performers decide in advance. When will I reassess? What conditions justify stopping? How long is long enough? You don't, so you quit when it feels uncomfortable. That's not a strategy. That's impulse. And impulse is expensive. Now let's expose the lie that keeps you repeating this cycle. I'll just find something I won't want to quit. That doesn't exist. Everything worth building becomes hard before it becomes rewarding. Everything. The people who succeed aren't the ones who found the perfect thing. They're the ones who stayed when it stopped feeling exciting. That's the entire difference. Talent doesn't matter as much as tolerance. Tolerance for boredom. Tolerance for uncertainty. Tolerance for delayed results. You weren't trained for that, so you quit early. Again and again. And every quit reinforces the habit. Your brain learns. When it gets uncomfortable, we leave. That habit compounds. Quitting becomes automatic. That's why starting feels easier than continuing. Now here's the truth you need to sit with. Most people don't fail. They stop too soon, right before momentum would have appeared, right before identity would have stabilized, right before results would have shown. And because they stopped, they never see what was possible. That's not tragic. It's avoidable. But only if you change how you interpret the hard phase. Because knowing why you quit isn't enough. You need a rule that forces you to stay past the point your emotions want to leave. Here's what changes everything. You stop asking, do I feel like continuing? And start asking, did I earn the right to quit yet? Most people quit emotionally. High performers quit structurally. That difference decides who finishes. Because emotions are terrible judges. They spike, they crash, they lie when things get repetitive. So, winners remove emotion from the decision entirely. They decide quitting before they ever start, not the act of quitting, the conditions. Here's the rule they live by. I do not evaluate this until X time has passed. It's hens, no matter how it feels, no matter how boring it gets, no matter how uncertain it seems. They commit to a time horizon long enough for reality to show up, not feelings, reality. Most people never reach reality. They quit in the fog. And the fog always clears after consistency, not before. This is the phase you never survive, the phase where effort produces no applause, no reassurance, no visible progress, just repetition. This phase has a name. It's called the neutral zone. Nothing feels wrong. Nothing feels right. You're not failing. You're not winning. You're just showing up. And the neutral zone is where almost everyone leaves, because the brain hates neutrality. It wants pain or pleasure. Silence feels like danger. So it invents stories. This isn't working. You chose wrong. You're wasting time. Those thoughts are not signals. They're withdrawal symptoms. Your brain is withdrawing from novelty, from dopamine, from excitement. And withdrawal always feels like doubt. High performers know this, so they don't argue with the thoughts. They don't analyze them. They don't try to feel better. They outlast them. That's the skill nobody teaches. Outlasting your own doubt. Here's the next shift. You stop measuring progress by outcomes and start measuring it by continuation. Most people ask, am I getting results yet? High performers ask, am I still in the game? Because staying in the game long enough makes results inevitable. Quitting resets everything to zero. Continuation compounds. This is why average people restart constantly, and high performers look consistent. They're not more disciplined. They just don't reset. They don't restart when it gets boring. They don't reinvent when it gets slow. They stay. Now let's talk about the lie that causes early quitting more than anything else. I should feel more confident by now. No. Confidence comes after evidence. Evidence comes after repetition. Repetition comes after discomfort. You reverse the order. You want confidence to arrive early. It never does. Confidence shows up late, quietly, after you've already proven something to yourself. So when you quit because confidence hasn't arrived, you quit right before it was scheduled to. That's the cruel timing of growth. It rewards patience, not intelligence. Now let's talk about the identity problem. When you start something new, you are bad at it. That threatens your self-image, especially if you're used to being competent. So quitting becomes a way to protect ego. You don't fail, you just stop. Stopping feels cleaner than being bad publicly. High performers accept being bad longer. They understand that looking foolish is the tax for looking skilled later. You quit to preserve image. They stay to build capacity. That difference decides who finishes. Now here's the rule that stops quitting permanently. This rule is uncomfortable. That's why it works. You do not quit on a bad day. Ever. Bad days distort judgment. Bad days amplify doubt. Bad days exaggerate discomfort. If you quit on a bad day, you're not deciding. You're reacting. High performers only reassess on neutral days. Days where emotion is flat, calm, boring. That's when judgment is clearest. So they survive bad days without decision-making. They show up, they do the minimum, they don't evaluate, and bad days pass. Always. This one rule alone would eliminate 80% of your quitting, because most quitting happens in emotional spikes, not logical moments. Now let's talk about effort. You think quitting means stopping effort. It doesn't. It means stopping identity reinforcement. Every day you continue, even imperfectly, you send yourself a message. I don't abandon things when they get uncomfortable. That message compounds. It builds self-trust. Self-trust is the real reward of persistence, not outcomes. Outcomes lag. Self-trust grows daily. And once you trust yourself, quitting becomes rare. Because you don't need to protect your ego anymore. You know you'll follow through. Now let's talk about boredom. This is where most people fail to understand the process. Boredom is not a sign of stagnation. It's a sign of stability. Stability means your nervous system is no longer overloaded. And overloaded systems don't compound. Stable ones do. High performers don't escape boredom. They settle into it. They build inside it. They understand boredom means the foundation is setting. You mistake boredom for a warning. It's not. It's the sound of momentum becoming quiet. Now let's talk about comparison again. Comparison kills continuation because it makes your timeline feel wrong. You think, they're moving faster. I should be further. I must be behind. That thought causes panic. Panic causes quitting. High performers don't compare timelines. They compare exposure time. How long have they actually been doing this? Almost always. The answer humbles them. People you admire didn't get lucky. They stayed longer than you. That's it. Now let's talk about quitting fantasies. Everyone imagines the relief of quitting. More time, less pressure, less stress. And yes, quitting brings relief, briefly. Then something worse replaces it. Regret. Regret is quieter than stress, but heavier, and regret lasts longer. High performers choose short-term stress to avoid long-term regret. You choose short-term relief and inherit long-term dissatisfaction. That trade compounds too. Now let's make this practical. Here's the anti-quitting framework. Before you start anything meaningful, you decide 3 things. Minimum duration, how long you will continue no matter what. Not how long until success. How long until evaluation is allowed. Minimum standard, what showing up means on bad days. Not your best effort, your minimum viable effort. Exit conditions. Clear, objective reasons that justify stopping. Not feelings, not boredom, not comparison. These 3 decisions remove quitting as an impulse. They turn it into a conscious choice. Most people never define these. So quitting happens automatically. Now here's the part that changes identity. Once you stay past the urge to quit, something flips. The work feels lighter. Not because it's easier, because you're no longer fighting yourself. Resistance loses its leverage when it realizes quitting isn't an option, so it quiets down. That's why people say, it gets easier. It doesn't. You get committed, and commitment silences doubt. Now the final truth. You don't quit because you lack discipline. You quit because you don't trust the process. And you don't trust the process because you've never stayed long enough to see it work. That's the loop. You break it by staying once, just once, past the emotional exit point. That experience rewires everything. Now the final challenge. This is not motivational. It's structural. Pick one thing you're currently considering quitting. 1. Decide right now. I will continue this for X more days, regardless of how it feels. Choose a realistic number, not heroic. Enough to pass the doubt phase. Then define the minimum effort required to count as showing up. Do not exceed it. Consistency beats intensity. When doubt appears, and it will, you don't negotiate. You show up at the minimum. That's it. At the end of that period, reassess calmly, not emotionally. Most likely, you won't want to quit anymore. Not because it suddenly worked, but because you changed. If this exposed a pattern you've been repeating for years, leave a comment with one word, stayed, and subscribe if you want more of this. Not motivation, not hype, but the mental rules that keep you in the game long enough to win. Because most people don't quit because they failed. They quit because they never learned how to survive the part where winning is still invisible. And once you stop quitting there, everything finally has time to work.